Fascism is often seen as something of the past, something we've left behind after World War II. But what if I told you that 1 in 4 people globally still live in countries with growing fascist or authoritarian movements? Or that in some nations, the number of far-right extremist groups has increased by 55% in just a few years? It's a shocking reality. Fascism isn't gone. It's evolving. And it's still very much a threat today. In this video, we'll dive into the rise of fascism, how it began, how it grew, and how it's showing up again in modern politics. We'll look at the tools and tactics fascists use to seize power, how they divide societies, and why their ideologies still manage to attract followers. We'll explore history's warning signs, but also the things we can learn from those who fought against it. Stay tuned as we uncover how a global crisis, a single leader's power, and clever propaganda have the potential to change the course of history, again. Chapter 1: The Birth of Fascism, a perfect storm of crisis. Fascism didn't emerge from thin air. It was a response to a world in crisis. After World War I, Europe was drowning in economic despair. Germany's economy was in freefall, hyperinflation wiped out savings, and millions were unemployed. In Italy, the war had left a deep scar, and the country felt it hadn't been rewarded as promised. People were frustrated, angry, and looking for someone to blame. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, humiliated Germany and left the nation in ruins. The world had never seen such a severe global downturn as the Great Depression of the 1930s. Nations were crumbling under economic hardship, which created an opening for radical ideologies. Fascism promised strength, stability, and unity in a world that seemed to have lost all three. Mussolini's Italy was the first to formally embrace fascism. In 1922, Mussolini marched on Rome with his black shirts, claiming he would restore order. His promise of national rebirth struck a chord. But it wasn't just Italy. Across Europe, political instability set the stage for fascist ideologies to spread. The chaotic conditions gave fascists the perfect environment to rise to power. Fascism thrived in moments of desperation. Fascism, like a disease, often strikes where there's an open wound, historian Stanley Payne once said. And in the early 20th century, Europe was full of open wounds. Fascists capitalized on fear and frustration to gain followers. Chapter 2: The Cult of Personality, Leaders who drove fascism. At the heart of fascism is a leader, someone who promises to solve all problems and be the voice of the people. Mussolini famously said, "Everything in the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state." He believed that the state and its leader were above all. His words resonated with Italians who felt betrayed and helpless. They needed a strong figure to guide them. In Germany, Hitler's rise was even more dramatic. He didn't just offer solutions, he offered a vision, a future where the German people would dominate Europe. In his book Mein Kampf, Hitler outlined his racist ideology, claiming that Germans were a master race, destined to rule the world. His ability to speak directly to people's fears and hopes is what made him so effective. Charismatic leaders like Mussolini and Hitler often controlled the narrative. They shaped how people saw themselves and the world around them. Fascist leaders use their personal appeal to unite their followers. The more people identify with the leader, the less they question his decisions. As Hitler once said, the leader of the people must be a reflection of the people's desires. Their leaders were not just politicians, they were symbols of strength, hope, and pride. They convinced followers that any sacrifice was worth the promise of a stronger, purer nation. This personal connection between leader and follower made fascism much more than a political movement. It was a culture, an identity. Chapter 3: Fascism's Strategy, Divide, Distract, and Dominate. Fascist regimes are masters of manipulation. Their strategies are designed to divide society, distract the people, and consolidate power. One of the most successful ways fascists achieve this is through the use of scapegoats. During the Nazi era, Jews were blamed for Germany's defeat in World War I and its economic struggles. This, us versus them, mentality was used to rally support and distract from the real issues. Fascists know that fear is a powerful tool. By painting a picture of a threatening world full of enemies, they can convince people to accept authoritarian control. Hitler's speeches, for example, often centered around the idea of an imminent threat to the nation. By constantly pointing to external dangers, fascist leaders could convince citizens that their freedoms had to be sacrificed for the greater good. In Italy, Mussolini targeted the left-wing political groups and trade unions, portraying them as enemies of the state. His government controlled the media, presenting only the narrative they wanted people to hear. This created an atmosphere of constant crisis, where people felt like they had no choice but to support the regime. In modern times, fascists often exploit social media to divide people. They spread misinformation and create echo chambers that reinforce their views. A 2019 study found that fake news spreads 6 times faster than true information on Twitter. This strategy of distraction and division keeps people from questioning the status quo. Fascist regimes often use flashy spectacles to keep the public's attention. Think of the massive rallies in Nazi Germany or Mussolini's grandiose parades in Rome. These events were not just celebrations, they were tools for creating a sense of unity and strength. The visual spectacle made fascism seem like an unstoppable force. If you're enjoying the insights so far, don't forget to hit subscribe. Stay tuned for more in-depth looks at how fascism shapes the world we live in today. Chapter 4: The Global Spread, How Fascism Crossed Borders. While fascism initially rose in Europe, its influence soon spread to other parts of the world. Fascist movements found fertile ground in Latin America during the 1930s and 1940s. Leaders like Brazil's Getulio Vargas and Argentina's Juan Perón adopted elements of fascist ideology to consolidate power. The Spanish Civil War, 1936–1939, was another crucial moment in the global spread of fascism. Francisco Franco's fascist regime came to power with the support of Hitler and Mussolini. His victory showed that fascism wasn't just a European phenomenon, it was global in scope. In Asia, Japan embraced militarism and authoritarian rule, with leaders like Hideki Tojo modeling their ideology after fascist regimes. By the late 1930s, Japan was deeply involved in World War II, aiming to expand its empire across Asia. Fascism's reach extended beyond Europe in more subtle ways. Its propaganda, ideas, and symbols were adopted by various nationalist movements worldwide. Even in the United States, isolationist groups like the America First Committee expressed admiration for Mussolini's Italy and Hitler's Germany. A 1941 Gallup poll found that nearly 40% of Americans had a favorable view of Mussolini. Fascism's adaptability made it attractive to different countries with different political and cultural backgrounds. Its appeal was rooted in the promise of national strength and the rejection of democracy's perceived weakness. Chapter 5: Resistance and Rebellion, The Battle Against Fascism. Fascism didn't go unchallenged. Resistance movements sprang up in every country occupied by fascist regimes. The French resistance fought back against the Nazi occupation, while the partisans in Italy used guerrilla tactics to undermine Mussolini's rule. In Poland, the Home Army coordinated sabotage and intelligence missions against the Nazis. In Germany itself, there were groups like the White Rose, a group of university students who actively opposed the Nazi regime. Their pamphlets called for non-violent resistance and protested the government's crimes. Sadly, many of these resistance movements were crushed, but their efforts weren't in vain. They showed that fascism could be resisted, even from within. Famous figures like Winston Churchill led the charge against fascism from the outside. His defiant speeches inspired millions to continue the fight. He once said, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few," referring to the British pilots who fought the Luftwaffe during the Battle of Britain. Even after the fall of fascism in World War II, the resistance continued in other forms. The moral lessons learned from the fight against fascism have influenced movements for civil rights, freedom, and democracy ever since. People learned that no regime, no matter how powerful, could be allowed to dominate the world without being challenged. If you're liking the content so far, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. Chapter 6: Echoes of the Past, How Fascism Still Haunts Us. Though fascism was defeated in World War II, its influence continues to shape global politics. Far-right movements today often adopt the language and symbols of fascist regimes. In Europe, groups like Italy's Lega and France's National Rally echo Mussolini and Le Pen's rhetoric of nationalism and anti-immigration. In the United States, the rise of far-right groups like the Proud Boys and the alt-right draws on fascist themes of white nationalism and authoritarianism. A 2020 report from the Southern Poverty Law Center found that the number of hate groups in the US had surged by 55% in the past 4 years. Fascism's revival is not limited to the fringe. Mainstream politicians often use divisive rhetoric to gain power, feeding off public fear of outsiders. In Hungary and Poland, right-wing leaders have cracked down on press freedoms and minority rights, reminiscent of fascist tactics. As history shows, the rise of fascism is often fueled by economic crisis, social division, and the breakdown of democratic norms. The warning signs are all around us, but many people still fail to recognize them. The fascist playbook, divide, distract, and dominate, is alive and well, even in the 21st century. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more thought-provoking content on today's political landscape.